Let me ask you something. What if 2026 isn't the year you try harder, but the year you finally tell the truth about what's not working? Not the polished truth, not the social media truth, the quiet, uncomfortable, honest truth you usually avoid, because real change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with courage. Let's start with the truth. Not the kind of truth that sounds good in a quote or fits neatly into a caption, but the kind of truth that makes your chest feel tight when you finally say it out loud. The truth we avoid because it forces us to look at our lives without filters, excuses, or stories we've been telling ourselves to stay comfortable. Rebuilding yourself in 2026 does not begin with ambition. It begins with honesty. Because pretending is exhausting and denial is a quiet form of self-betrayal. Most of us don't lie to others nearly as much as we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves we're fine when we're running on empty. We say it's not that bad when something is slowly breaking us. We stay in situations that drain us because leaving would require admitting that what we invested in no longer serves us. And that admission feels like failure. But here's the truth no one talks about. Refusing to face reality doesn't protect you from pain. It locks you inside it. Truth is uncomfortable because it removes the mask. It asks hard questions. Why am I still tolerating this? Why do I keep shrinking to keep others comfortable? Why am I exhausted all the time? And when you ask those questions honestly, you don't always like the answers. Sometimes the answer is that you stayed too long. Sometimes it's that you abandoned yourself to be accepted. Sometimes it's that you were afraid to disappoint people who were already disappointing you. And that realization can feel heavy. But heaviness is not weakness. It's the weight of awareness. And awareness is the first step to change. Rebuilding with truth means you stop romanticizing your suffering. You stop calling burnout, hustle, emotional neglect, patience, and constant anxiety just how life is. You stop turning pain into a personality trait. Because when you name something honestly, you take its power away. You can't heal what you refuse to name. You can't rebuild a life on a foundation made of denial. Truth also means acknowledging what hurt you, even if no one else validates it. Even if you were told to move on, be grateful, or be strong, strength is not silence. Strength is allowing yourself to say, that mattered, that affected me, that changed me. When you deny your pain, it doesn't disappear. It leaks into your relationships, your reactions, your body, and your choices. Healing starts when you give yourself permission to tell the truth without minimizing it. And let's be clear, truth is not about blaming. It's about responsibility, not the kind that says, everything was my fault, but the kind that says, this is my life, and I get to decide what happens next. When you tell the truth about what's not working, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for people to change, for circumstances to improve, for motivation to magically appear. You start working with reality instead of fighting it. Rebuilding with truth also means letting go of the stories that once kept you safe, but now keep you stuck. The story that you have to be everything for everyone. The story that your worth comes from being needed. The story that rest is laziness and boundaries are selfish. These stories may have helped you survive at one point, but survival is not the same as living. And 2026 is not asking you to survive again. It's asking you to live with intention. Truth requires courage because once you see clearly, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend you didn't notice the patterns, the red flags, the emotional cost. And yes, truth might require you to grieve the time you lost, the version of yourself you abandoned, the expectations that didn't come true. But grief is not a setback. Grief is evidence that you cared, and caring deeply is not a weakness. It's a sign of a fully alive human being. When you rebuild with truth, you stop chasing change through motivation and start building it through alignment. You ask, does this choice match who I am becoming? Not, will this keep everyone else comfortable? You choose clarity over chaos, even when clarity is painful, especially when it's painful. because pain with purpose is different from pain without direction. So as you step into 2026, don't ask yourself how to become better. Ask yourself how to become more honest about your limits, more honest about your needs, more honest about what you can no longer carry. Because the bravest thing you can do this year is stop pretending. Truth may not be easy, but it is solid ground, and you can't rebuild anything meaningful without solid ground. Let's talk about the version of you that learned how to survive. The one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The one who overgave, overworked, and overextended because that felt safer than being rejected, criticized, or abandoned. That version of you deserves compassion, not judgment. They did the best they could with what they knew at the time. But here's the truth that can feel hard to accept. The skills that helped you survive a difficult season may quietly sabotage you in a season meant for growth. Survival teaches us habits that make sense in crisis but feel heavy and calm. When life was uncertain, you learned to be hyper-aware of other people's moods. You learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. You learned to be strong, independent, and emotionally guarded. These weren't flaws. They were adaptations. They were how you stayed afloat when the water was rough. But rebuilding yourself in 2026 means recognizing that you are no longer in that same storm, and you don't have to keep swimming like you are. Letting go of who you were to survive is not about erasing your past. It's about releasing the armor you no longer need. Armor is heavy. It protects, but it also restricts movement. You can't breathe deeply, love freely, or dream boldly when you're constantly braced for impact. Growth requires softness, and softness can feel terrifying to someone who learned that being soft once led to pain. This is where many people get stuck. They confuse familiarity with safety. Even when survival patterns are painful, they're predictable. You know how to function in them. You know how to endure. But endurance is not the same as fulfillment. And if you keep clinging to the identity that kept you safe back then, you may never step into the life that's waiting for you now. Releasing your survival self also means grieving the reason that version existed in the first place. You don't just let go and move on. You acknowledge what you had to endure. You honor the resilience it took to keep going when things were unfair, lonely, or overwhelming. You allow yourself to say, that was hard, and I shouldn't have had to be that strong for that long. There is deep healing in naming that truth without minimizing it. Sometimes letting go looks like stopping the need to prove your worth through exhaustion. It looks like resting without guilt. It looks like asking for help and not apologizing for needing it. It looks like choosing relationships where you don't have to perform, impress, or disappear to be loved. These choices can feel uncomfortable because they challenge the identity you built to survive. But discomfort is often the doorway to growth. There's also fear that comes with change. If I'm not the strong one, who am I? If I stop overgiving, will I still be valued? If I set boundaries, will people leave? These fears are valid, but they're rooted in an old reality. The truth is, the people who only valued you for what you endured or provided may struggle when you change. And that can hurt. But rebuilding yourself means choosing alignment over approval. Your future does not require you to stay small, guarded, or constantly alert. It requires presence. It requires trust. And trust doesn't mean ignoring red flags or being naïve. It means believing that you can handle discomfort without abandoning yourself. It means knowing that you don't need to earn rest, love, or belonging through suffering. As you move into 2026, give yourself permission to evolve, not by rejecting who you were, but by thanking them and gently letting them step aside. You can say, you kept me alive. Now let me learn how to live. This transition takes time. You will catch yourself slipping back into old patterns. Be patient. Awareness is progress. Rebuilding is not about becoming harder. It's about becoming truer. Truer to your needs, your values, and your capacity. You are allowed to outgrow the version of you that was built for survival. That version was never meant to carry you forever. It was meant to get you through. And now you get to choose what comes next. Let's be honest about boundaries because they're one of the most misunderstood ideas we talk about. Boundaries are often seen as harsh, cold, or selfish, especially if you grew up believing that being a good person meant always being available, agreeable, and accommodating. Many of us learned early that love was something you earned by saying yes, by staying quiet, by not making things difficult. So when we hear the word boundary, it can feel like a threat to connection. But the truth is, boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are guidelines that teach people how to treat you, and more importantly, they teach you how to treat yourself. When you don't have boundaries, you don't actually have closeness, you have exhaustion. You have resentment that builds quietly. You have relationships where you feel unseen, overused, or taken for granted. And often you blame yourself for feeling that way, telling yourself you should be more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. But what if the issue isn't that you feel too much? What if the issue is that you've been giving without limits? Rebuilding yourself in 2026 means understanding that self-respect is not loud or aggressive. It's calm, it's clear. It shows up when you say, "This doesn't work for me," without over-explaining, apologizing, or feeling guilty. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protection. They protect your time, your energy, your emotional well-being, and your sense of self. Here's the hard part. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not like the new you. They may call you distant, changed, or difficult. And that can hurt, especially if you care deeply and don't want to disappoint anyone. But boundaries reveal truth. They show you who respects you and who only respected your compliance. And that clarity, while painful at first, is incredibly freeing. Setting boundaries requires you to believe that your needs matter as much as anyone else's. That belief doesn't come easily if you're used to putting yourself last. You may feel selfish the first few times you say no. You may feel anxious when you don't immediately respond, fix, or explain. That discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something new. Boundaries also require consistency. Saying no once isn't enough if your actions keep saying yes. Rebuilding yourself means aligning your words with your behavior. It means following through even when it's uncomfortable, even when silence feels awkward, even when you're tempted to go back to old patterns just to keep the peace. Peace that costs you yourself is not peace, it's self-abandonment. There's also a deeper layer to boundaries that we don't talk about enough. Boundaries are not just about other people, they're about your relationship with yourself. That they show up when you stop pushing your body past exhaustion, when you stop saying yes to commitments that drain you, when you stop engaging in conversations that leave you feeling small, when you stop tolerating disrespect, even in subtle forms. Every time you honor a boundary, you send yourself a message, I am worthy of care. Healthy boundaries don't end relationships, they strengthen the right ones. The people who truly care about you may need time to adjust, but they will learn. They will respect your honesty. And in those relationships, you'll finally feel safe enough to be fully yourself without performing, proving, or pretending. Boundaries are also how you create space for growth. When everything and everyone has unlimited access to you, there's no room left to reflect, to heal, to build. Rebuilding requires space. Space to think clearly, space to rest, space to decide who you're becoming. Boundaries create that space. As you step into 2026, remember this, you don't owe anyone constant access to your life. You don't owe explanations for protecting your peace. You don't owe burnout in exchange for belonging. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about choosing yourself without guilt. And when you choose yourself, you show others how to choose you too. This is what self-respect looks like in practice. Quiet, firm, loving, and powerful. Let's talk about comfort, because comfort is seductive. It whispers that staying the same is safer than risking change. It tells you that waiting is wiser than acting, that silence is easier than speaking, that settling is better than standing alone. Comfort doesn't shout, it soothes. And that's exactly why it can keep you stuck for years without you even realizing it. Choosing courage over comfort in 2026 is not about dramatic leaps or fearless confidence. It's about making small, honest choices that scare you just enough to mean something. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, but real courage lives alongside fear. It shows up when your hands are shaking and you move forward anyway. When your voice cracks and you speak anyway. When you don't know how things will turn out, but you know you can't keep living the same way. Comfort says, at least you know what this feels like. Courage says, you deserve better than familiar pain. Most of us were taught to prioritize being liked over being honest, to avoid conflict, to keep things smooth, to not rock the boat. And over time, that lesson becomes internalized. We stop saying what we need. We stop asking for what we want. We stop challenging what hurts us. We tell ourselves we're being mature, patient, understanding. But beneath that calm surface is often resentment, exhaustion, and a quiet sense of betrayal toward ourselves. Choosing courage means telling the truth even when it disrupts the room. It means having conversations you've been rehearsing in your head for months. It means saying no without padding it with excuses. It means walking away from situations that no longer align with who you're becoming, even when there's no guarantee that something better is waiting immediately. Courage doesn't promise comfort. It promises integrity. One of the hardest acts of courage is allowing yourself to be seen as you are, not as who you think you should be. That means admitting uncertainty, admitting you don't have it all figured out, admitting that you're tired of pretending. Vulnerability feels risky because it removes the armor. But without vulnerability, there is no growth, no connection, no rebuilding. You can't build a meaningful life while hiding from your own truth. Comfort keeps you repeating old patterns because they're predictable. Courage invites you into uncertainty. And uncertainty can feel like standing at the edge of something unknown, unsure if you'll land on solid ground. But staying in what you know when what you know is hurting you is its own kind of risk. It slowly erodes your confidence, your joy, your sense of possibility. Courage also means taking responsibility for your choices without turning that responsibility into shame. It's saying, this isn't working and I get to change it, instead of I'm stuck and there's nothing I can do. Responsibility is empowering when it's rooted in self-compassion. It reminds you that while you can't control everything that happened to you, you can control how you move forward. There will be moments when choosing courage feels lonely, when people don't understand your decisions, when you're tempted to go back to what's familiar just to feel connected again. In those moments, remember that loneliness is often a transition, not a destination. You're between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space, as uncomfortable as it is where growth happens. Courage is not loud confidence or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's quiet. It's getting up one more time. It's choosing yourself when it would be easier not to. It's staying true to your values when no one is watching. Over time, these small acts of courage build trust within yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of a rebuilt life. As you move into 2026, don't ask yourself what feels easiest. Ask yourself what feels honest, what aligns with your values, what kind of life you want to look back on. Comfort will keep you exactly where you are. Courage will take you somewhere new. And even though the path may feel uncertain, it will be yours. Let's talk about alignment, because so many people mistake a busy life for a meaningful one, and a successful life for a fulfilled one. You can be doing all the right things on paper and still feel deeply disconnected from yourself. You can meet expectations, hit milestones, and keep everyone else comfortable while quietly feeling lost. Building a life that feels like you in 2026 requires an honest reckoning with that disconnect. It asks you to stop measuring your life by applause and start measuring it by peace. Alignment begins when you stop asking, what should I do next? And start asking, what matters to me now? Not what mattered 5 years ago, not what your family expects, not what looks impressive from the outside, what matters to you in this season of your life. Values change as we grow, and there is no failure in outgrowing old goals. The failure comes from clinging to them out of fear of judgment or starting over. When your life is out of alignment, your body often knows before your mind does. You feel restless, irritable, drained, or numb. You may feel a constant sense of pressure, as if you're always behind even when you're doing your best. That's not laziness or ingratitude. That's a signal. It's your inner voice telling you that something is off, that the way you're living no longer matches who you are becoming. Building a life that feels like you means giving yourself permission to listen to those signals without immediately dismissing them. It means slowing down long enough to notice what energizes you and what depletes you. Who you feel most like yourself around. What environments help you breathe more easily? What kind of work, relationships, and rhythms support your well